Do you know what a force 15 wind feels like? Not a hurricane gust, not a severe thunderstorm. Force 15 on the extended Beaufort scale is the kind of wind that meteorologists in China described as generating on the evening of July 6, 2026, when the remnants of Typhoon Maysak collided with one of the most dangerous atmospheric setups in Chinese meteorological history and produced something that is not supposed to happen in the landlocked heart of central China's Hubei Province. A wedge tornado, large enough to be classified by storm observers as potentially EF2 to low-end EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale, ripped through the densely populated urban centers of Huanggang and Ezhou cities, tearing a path of destruction that experts are already calling historically rare. And the single image that captures what that wind was actually capable of is this: a 30-year-old man sitting in his apartment on the 12th floor of a residential building in Huanggang City was physically sucked out of his home by the force of the vortex passing outside his window. His sofa went with him. His wall cabinets went with him. His coffee tables, his dining tables, his chairs, all of it vacuumed out of the apartment into the night sky above a Chinese city in a matter of seconds. He is now in intensive care in a hospital. By the time the full scope of what happened in Hubei Province on the night of July 6th was confirmed by Chinese authorities and the Xinhua news agency the following morning, the numbers were staggering. At least 17 people were killed across the affected region, according to Al Jazeera's updated reporting, with at least 11 deaths confirmed in Hubei Province alone and another 6 in neighboring Guangxi, where Typhoon Maysak had been producing catastrophic flooding. More than 331 people were injured in Hubei, with 5 in critical condition admitted to designated hospitals. The broader severe weather system, which hammered the cities of Huangxi, Huanggang, Ezhou, and Xianing between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m., local time on July 6th, affected approximately 14,600 people in total. It destroyed 22 buildings outright and damaged more than 4,155 additional structures, a figure that is close enough to 5,000 homes to make the title of this video not an exaggeration, but a precise reflection of what Xinhua itself reported. More than 1,000 atmu of farmland, equivalent to about 67 hectares or 166 acres, was damaged or destroyed. Emergency responders evacuated nearly 1,000 people. 246 residents were permanently relocated away from structures too damaged to re-enter. Local authorities in Huanggang used 3 words to describe what had just happened to their city. They called it a historically rare event. But here's the problem. The headline number of destroyed homes and the casualty count, as catastrophic as they are, do not fully communicate what this tornado actually did in meteorological and historical terms. And that context is essential to understanding why what happened in Hubei on the night of July 6th is not just a Chinese disaster story, but a globally significant weather event. China is not tornado country the way the American Midwest is tornado country. The United States records more than 1,000 tornadoes in a typical year. China, by contrast, records an average of approximately 60 to 108 tornado events annually across the entire country, depending on the methodology used to count them. Even within China, the provinces most associated with tornado activity are the coastal and southeastern provinces of Jiangsu and Guangdong, where the combination of warm sea air and seasonal weather patterns creates the atmospheric instability needed for tornado formation. Hubei Province, sitting in the interior of central China on the middle reaches of the Yangtze River, is not a place where people think about tornadoes. The Hubei Meteorological Service's own chief expert, Wang Xiaoling, told Hubei Daily that the province's last recorded tornado occurred in May 2021 in Wuhan's Kaidian district. Before that event, documented tornado activity in Hubei is sparse. This is a province where a tornado is not an annual weather threat. It is a multi-year rarity. What produced the July 6 tornado was a meteorological collision of rare and dangerous precision. Wang Xiaoling of the Hubei Meteorological Service explained the mechanism directly. The interaction between the remnants of Typhoon Maysak and the seasonal Meiyu front generated exceptionally warm and humid airflow over Hubei. The Meiyu, which translates as plum rain in Chinese, is the semi-permanent frontal boundary that emerges each late spring and early summer across eastern China, Taiwan, and Japan. This feature drives prolonged periods of heavy rain and thunderstorms each year, and the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River, which runs directly through Hubei, sit at its most active and potentially most dangerous zone. During a normal Meiyu season, this front produces heavy rainfall and occasional severe convective weather, but not typically tornado-generating supercell thunderstorms. What made July 6th different was Typhoon Maysak. Maysak had made landfall in southern China in the preceding days and then pushed northward and inland as a weakening tropical system. As it moved into the Chinese interior, it pulled enormous volumes of warm, saturated tropical air northward into contact with the existing Meiyu front and an influx of cold air from the north, creating a 3-way atmospheric collision. The resulting atmospheric instability was, according to Chinese meteorological experts, capable of generating exactly the kind of rotating supercell thunderstorm structure from which violent tornadoes emerge. Severe convective weather began developing across eastern Hubei from approximately 7 p.m. Monsieur local time on July 6th, and multiple storm cells were simultaneously active across the region. This next part matters, because the path that the Huanggang tornado chose was not merely unfortunate in general terms. According to Chinese storm chaser and meteorologist Eric Wang, who documented the event in extraordinary detail on social media as it unfolded, the tornado in Huanggang picked the deadliest possible path, directly through the city center. His words, posted on July 7th, as daylight revealed the full scope of the damage, were clinical and unsparing. Entire rows of brick homes severely damaged or destroyed, cars tossed. The tornado had crossed the Yangtze River before striking the urban center of Huanggang, and China meteorological enthusiasts, the professional community tracking the event, stated that a tornado crossing the Yangtze River and then striking two separate prefecture-level city centers was likely unprecedented in China's meteorological history. Not unusual, not rare, unprecedented. The Huanggang tornado struck the urban area of Huanggang between 20:10 and 20:30 local time on July 6th. The timeline reconstructed by Caixin Global and the Watchers News Network shows two separate tornado impacts in the space of approximately 1 hour that evening. At 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. local time, a tornado struck residential areas in Ezhou City, with wind speeds reaching Category 13 on the Chinese wind scale, which corresponds to sustained winds exceeding 40 meters per second, or approximately 90 miles per hour. 5 people were killed in Ezhou, and 8 were injured, with 428 people affected and 178 relocated. Ezhou's Emergency Management Bureau confirmed the casualty figures by 5:10 a.m. On July 7th, following overnight rescue operations, deploying more than 1,600 emergency responders. Around 8 p.m., roughly an hour after Ezhou was hit, the larger and more violent Huanggang tornado arrived. Huanggang's on-site command headquarters confirmed in official statements that the tornado produced winds exceeding force 15 on the Chinese wind scale, a designation that places the event above the standard 12-force Beaufort scale used internationally and into the extended range, reserved for the most extreme atmospheric events. The Xinhua news agency classified the Huanggang tornado as an EF2 based on preliminary damage assessment, with storm observers on the ground suggesting it may have reached low-end EF3 in its most intense phases. Most people are missing what EF2 to EF3 wind speed actually means in physical terms. On the enhanced Fujita scale, EF2 carries estimated wind speeds of 111 to 135 miles per hour. EF3 pushes that to 136 to 165 miles per hour. In confirmed case studies from the United States, EF2 tornadoes destroy mobile homes entirely, cause major structural damage to well-built homes, tear roofs off apartment buildings, and overturn boxcars and heavy trucks. In Huanggang that evening, multiple heavy-duty trucks at the Chicheng Logistics Company facility were physically lifted off the ground and displaced by as much as 30 meters, approximately 98 feet, from their original positions. Warehouses were destroyed. The southern section of Baoda Avenue, one of Huanggang's major urban arterials, sustained devastating damage. The Changjiang Community Warehouse Project, the Chicheng Logistics Facility, residential communities, factory complexes, and logistics parks across Huangzhou District were all directly in the tornado's path. Here is why this is serious in a way that the word rare alone does not adequately convey. Chicheng Logistics Company Chairman Wu Shengbin's father was killed when the tornado tore through his family's facility. His mother was reported missing in the immediate aftermath. The vehicle losses at the company alone amounted to tens of millions of yuan. 50 to 60 trucks were tossed, mangled, or destroyed in a matter of minutes by a weather system that no one in Huanggang had ever experienced in their lifetime, in a province where tornadoes are so infrequent that the meteorological record essentially treats them as anomalies rather than risks, requiring community preparedness infrastructure. And then there was Wang, the man whose brother-in-law Zhang lived on the 12th floor of a residential building in Huanggang. Wang told the Xiaoxiang Morning Herald exactly what happened in the moment the tornado vortex passed. He said the intense winds simply sucked his brother-in-law out of his home. The wall cabinets vanished. The sofas vanished. The coffee tables, the dining tables, the chairs, all of it gone in an instant. Wang described it by saying it was as if the entire building had been hollowed out from inside. His brother-in-law Zhang was later found unconscious outside the building, having been pulled from the 12th floor and deposited somewhere below. He is now in intensive care. In that image, a man and his furniture removed from a high-rise apartment by atmospheric suction is not a dramatic metaphor. It is a documented physical consequence of what meteorologists call the pressure differential created by a tornado vortex, a zone of dramatically reduced atmospheric pressure so intense that the pressure difference between inside and outside a building can cause windows to explode outward, walls to rupture, and objects inside to be accelerated violently toward the low-pressure core of the vortex, as if drawn by an invisible vacuum. What happened next in the broader picture of China's concurrent weather disaster on July 6th and 7th reveals a country simultaneously fighting multiple catastrophic weather events in different regions with no breathing room between them. While Hubei was experiencing its historically rare tornado outbreak, Typhoon Maysak's flooding impact was still devastating Guangxi Province to the southwest. According to Al Jazeera, at least 40 rivers and waterways in Guangxi were overflowing as of July 7th. Guangxi issued the highest level red alert for flooding. At least 130,000 people had been evacuated from flood-affected areas across the province, with at least 6 people killed and 11 still missing. In the Guangxi capital of Nanning, the Huanggang River had overflowed its banks, inundating riverside walkways and businesses. The city of Hangzhou had seen its 24-hour precipitation records broken. Typhoon Maysak had brought enough rain to break rainfall records in multiple Guangxi locations. And in one particular village in Hangzhou, Maysak's floodwaters introduced a threat that officials confirmed to local media with no apparent irony. More than 800 snakes escaped from a flooded snake farm on July 7th. Social media video showed the snakes emerging above the muddy floodwaters. One villager had already been bitten and was receiving hospital treatment. A group of about a dozen local residents had formed a voluntary team to catch the escaped animals. One more thing you need to know. This entire cascade of disasters was unfolding in the shadow of something even larger, still approaching. While Hubei buried its dead and Guangxi managed its floods, the Chinese National Meteorological Center issued warnings on July 7th that northeastern Hubei should brace for additional heavy to torrential rain. Warnings were also issued for Guangdong, Hainan, Guangxi, and the northern provinces of Jilin, Shandong, and Liaoning, covering a geographic sweep spanning from tropical southern China to temperate northeastern China simultaneously. And looming over all of it, reported by Al Jazeera on July 7th, was Super Typhoon Bavi, which had already made landfall on United States territorial islands with sustained winds of approximately 150 miles per hour as of Tuesday afternoon, and was building intensity overnight before a projected landfall on China's eastern coast by Thursday. With eastern Hubei still in ruins, Guangxi still flooded, and at least 6 additional provinces under active weather warnings, Super Typhoon Bavi was already approaching. This is where it becomes dangerous for anyone trying to understand the cascading nature of what China has been experiencing in the first week of July 2026. These are not 3 separate weather stories. They are components of a single interconnected system, a weakened but moisture-laden tropical cyclone whose remnants generated the supercell thunderstorms that produced the Hubei tornadoes, while simultaneously producing record flooding in Guangxi with another powerful typhoon in the queue behind it. The National Meteorological Center's dual warning, covering both the immediate tornado aftermath zone and the incoming Bavi threat corridor, reflects exactly this recognition. The atmospheric setup that made July 6 possible has not been resolved. It has moved. Here is why this is serious in terms of Chinese infrastructure specifically. Hubei Province is not a rural backwater. It is, in the words of Reuters, a major industrial, automotive manufacturing, and technology hub for China. The provincial capital is Wuhan, a city of more than 12 million people, and one of China's most important industrial and logistics centers. Huanggang, the worst-hit city on July 6th, sits approximately 80 kilometers east of Wuhan, approximately 50 miles by road. Ezhou, the second-hit city, sits between them. This is the industrial heartland of central China, a region crisscrossed by highways, railways, manufacturing facilities, power plants, and logistics parks, exactly the kind of dense, interconnected infrastructure network that a tornado moving through urban areas damages in ways that cascade outward well beyond the immediate destruction zone. Roads blocked by debris disrupt supply chains. Power outages cascade through industrial facilities. Damaged logistics infrastructure affects the movement of goods across a broader regional economy. And now the focus shifts to the historical frame that puts July 6, 2026 into precise perspective, because this event is not unprecedented in China's tornado history in terms of casualties, but it sits closer to the catastrophic end of that history than any tornado since 2016. Go back to June 23, 2016. On that afternoon, a supercell thunderstorm developing ahead of an upper-level trough over China produced an EF4 tornado that struck Funing County in Yancheng City, Jiangsu Province, approximately 150 miles northwest of Shanghai. The tornado touched down around 2:30 p. Monsieur Locale time and carved a path of destruction for approximately 50 minutes across the landscape. When it was over, 98 people were dead and 846 injured, 152 of them critically. Around 3,102 homes were destroyed. 2 primary schools and 8 factory warehouses were leveled. The damage swath reached a peak width of 4. 1 kilometers, approximately 2. 5 miles, making it the widest tornado on record in China's meteorological documentation, stretching back to 1950. The China Meteorological Administration rated it an EF4, with maximum sustained winds greater than 240 feet per second, or 165 miles per hour, producing gate-to-gate azimuthal velocity differences peaking at 84, 5 meters per second. It was, in the peer-reviewed words of researchers from Peking University published in Weather and Forecasting, the deadliest tornado in China in the past 40 years at the time of its occurrence. The same Chinese storm chaser Eric Wang, watching the Huanggang tornado unfold on July 6, 2026, posted on the morning of July 7th that with at least 12 to 17 confirmed fatalities and more than 331 injuries, the Hubei event would be the deadliest Chinese tornado since Funing 2016. He noted an additional visual parallel that drew the attention of the meteorological community. Video from the Huanggang tornado appeared to show luminous objects orbiting the vortex as it moved through the city, similar to phenomena documented during the EF4 tornado that struck Rolling Fork, Mississippi in March 2023, generally believed to be vehicles or large debris caught in the outer circulation of the vortex and briefly illuminated by the tornado's own electrical activity. The comparison was not made lightly by the storm weather community. It reflected the extraordinary, unusual visual signature of what Huanggang experienced that night. And Hubei Province itself has its own grim tornado history predating even the 2016 Funing event. According to historical records compiled by Weather Underground and peer-reviewed research, the deadliest tornado ever recorded in China struck Hanchuan in Hubei Province on April 22, 1958, killing 133 people. The second deadliest in Chinese recorded history struck Huanggang, the exact same city, devastated on July 6, 2026, on April 16, 1977, killing 103 people. That 1977 Huanggang tornado was rated at least F3. The July 6, 2026 tornado has now struck Huanggang a second catastrophic time in less than 50 years, and it has done so in the context of a completely different urban landscape. The Huanggang of 2026, a prefecture-level city in central Hubei with a population of more than 600,000 in its urban districts, is a city of high-rise apartment buildings, multi-story logistics facilities, warehouses full of heavy-duty trucks, and densely packed residential neighborhoods. A built environment that delivers far more potential for catastrophic structural failure and human casualty than the Huanggang of 1977. The human stories coming from those residential neighborhoods in the aftermath of July 6th carry the same quiet devastation as disaster footage from any part of the world, and they matter in this story not as anecdote, but as the grounding of the meteorological statistics in real individual lives. A man named Wang, standing outside a hospital in Huanggang, telling a reporter that the tornado sucked his brother-in-law Zhang out of his apartment along with everything in it, and that the building itself looked as if it had been hollowed out from the inside. Workers at the Chicheng Logistics Company arriving at their facility on the morning of July 7th to find trucks moved 30 meters from where they had been parked, warehouses shredded, and the knowledge that their chairman's father was dead and his mother was missing. More than 3,000 rescue workers deployed through the night to search through collapsed buildings, overturn overturned vehicles, and account for residents reported missing by their neighbors. Local Huanggang authorities acknowledged the immense losses from the disaster in public statements, language that, in the context of Chinese official communications, carries significant weight. Chinese President Xi Jinping, informed of the disaster, called for what state broadcaster CCTV described as an all-out rescue and relief effort, specifically directing that affected residents be resettled quickly. Xi's direct involvement and public directive reflects the same scale of governmental response that the 2016 Funing tornado triggered, when Xi and Premier Li Keqiang both called for all-out rescue efforts and declared Funing a national-level disaster. The meteorological picture surrounding the Hubei event contains one more layer that deserves direct attention: the warning systems that did and did not function during this tornado outbreak. In the United States, the Storm Prediction Center and National Weather Service operate a continuous watch, warning, and advisory system for tornado-prone regions, issuing tornado watches hours in advance when atmospheric conditions favor development and tornado warnings the moment radar-indicated rotation is detected, sometimes giving residents 4 to 10 minutes of warning before a tornado arrives. China's tornado warning infrastructure, while improving rapidly since the 2016 Funing disaster prompted significant investment in radar coverage and public alert systems, still lags behind U.S. capability in the most densely populated interior regions. The Huanggang tornado struck between 2010 and 2030 at night, in darkness, in a city where most residents had no prior reason to expect a tornado was forming above them. The 30-year-old man, now in intensive care, was sitting in his 12th-floor apartment, presumably doing nothing more unusual than spending a Monday evening at home on a July night in central China. And now it gets worse because the atmospheric setup that generated July 6th is not simply an isolated historical anomaly. Peer-reviewed research on China's tornado climatology documents that July accounts for the highest proportion of strong Chinese tornadoes, defined as EF2 and above, of any single month of the year. The combination of the summer Mayu front, the warm and moist air pumped northward by the East Asian monsoon, and the periodic intrusion of weakening tropical cyclones from the South China Sea creates, across the east-central provinces of Jiangsu, Hubei, Guangdong, and Anhui, a seasonal tornado risk window that the scientific literature confirms is both real and systematically underappreciated by the population living within it. China is not the American Great Plains, but it is not immune. And on July 6, 2026, Hubei Province received the most direct possible evidence that the word historically rare describes not something impossible, but something that, under the right atmospheric conditions, the right typhoon remnant, the right Mayu front interaction, the right cold air intrusion, can be assembled without warning over cities of hundreds of thousands of people in the space of a few hours. Here is the detail that the Watchers News Network documented in its on-the-ground reporting, and that gives the most visceral measure of how far from its epicenter this tornado's impact actually reached. Separate footage and reports documented significant tornado damage near Day, another city in Hubei, where brick homes appeared to have lost upper floors and vehicles were reportedly displaced substantial distances. Video from restaurant diners inside Hubei captured the visible tornado from inside the dining room, debris sweeping across the road as the funnel passed. A video posted by Shanghai Daily on social media showed people on the ground floor of a building screaming as high winds forced open the building's glass doors, shattering one of them. These are the images of a tornado moving through a populated Chinese city that has no tornado culture, no basement shelter infrastructure built into residential construction, no community-level tornado preparedness that is second nature to anyone growing up on the American plains, and no mental map of what to do when the sky begins doing something that the province has not seen in 5 years and the city has not seen in 50. What happened next, in the early morning hours of July 7th, as rescue crews fanned out across the damage zone, was documented by local emergency management authorities in Ezhou with clinical precision. As of 5:10 a.m. on July 7th, 5 confirmed dead, 428 people affected, 178 relocated. In Huanggang, as daylight broke and photographers and officials were able to assess what the tornado had done to Baoda Avenue, to the Qicheng Logistics Facility, to the Changjiang Community Project, to the rows of residential brick homes in Huangzhou District. The images that circulated on Chinese social media and were captured by international wire services showed something that looked, in the words of observers and storm chasers alike, indistinguishable from the aftermath of a violent tornado in the American South or Midwest. Entire rows of brick homes damaged or destroyed, cars tossed and compacted, steel beams thrown considerable distances from the structures they once formed, heavy trucks overturned, mangled, and moved nearly 100 feet. A logistics complex rendered unrecognizable, and, somewhere in the wreckage, the possessions of a 30-year-old man who was sitting in his apartment on the 12th floor when the pressure differential outside his window exceeded anything his building's construction had ever been designed to withstand. China's National Meteorological Center is still monitoring the remnant low-pressure system from Typhoon Maysak as it continues moving north and east across the country. Authorities urged high alert specifically in eastern Hubei, northern Anhui, eastern Henan, northern Jiangsu, and Shandong province for sudden, severe convective weather capable of producing new tornadoes, because the atmospheric conditions that generated July 6th have not yet dissipated. And with Super Typhoon Bavi carrying 150-mile-per-hour sustained winds already past the U.S. Territorial islands, and forecast to make landfall on China's eastern coast by Thursday, the meteorological threat window for the same provinces now picking through tornado rubble has not closed. It has widened. Rescue and relief work in Huanggang and Ezhou continues. Damage assessment across the 22 fully destroyed buildings and the nearly 5,000 damaged structures is ongoing. The one person still listed as missing in official reports as of July 7th has not been found. The 331 people receiving hospital treatment in Hubei include 5 in critical condition whose outcomes have not yet been confirmed. And the man from the 12th floor, Zhang, whose brother-in-law stood outside a demolished building and told a reporter that the entire interior of his home had been sucked into the sky, is still in intensive care in a Chinese hospital, in a city that Huanggang's own command headquarters have described with 3 words that carry a weight far heavier than any weather statistic: historically rare event. That is what the atmosphere did to central China's most industrial province on the evening of July 6, 2026. And the same atmosphere, fed by the same chain of typhoon remnants, seasonal fronts, and cold air intrusions that has been producing disasters across this country for the past 2 weeks, has not yet finished moving across the map.